This is our section on Chinese religion. We're going to be looking at Chinese religion this week. We're going to have 3 lectures. The first one is going to be on Daoism, which is traditional Chinese religion. In the next lecture, we're going to look at Confucianism, which is both a philosophy and a religion. And on the third lecture is going to be very interesting. We're going to look at the 3 teachings of China: Daoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, and how the 3 have intertwined to create a very unique religious tradition in China. Okay, so part 1, we're going to look at Daoism. Included a quote here from the Tao Te Ching, which is a very important Taoist text written by the founder of Daoism, Lao Tzu. And it says here, "The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with endless possibilities. It is hidden by presence. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God." So I think Daoism is very well known for a few things. First, it's well known for these kind of complex, poetic, very cryptic poems like this, right? These verses like this that try to explain what the universe is like using all of these different metaphors. They're very dense, they're very difficult to understand. It is older than God, it is the eternal void, it is without birth, and so on and so forth. Another thing Taoism is known well for is its beautiful and bright temples filled with people who are giving offerings of incense. And people who go to Taoist temples are oftentimes just praying and devoting themselves to Chinese Taoist gods for the same reason that everyone goes to temples and devotes themselves for help with their problems in their lives and so on and so forth. And it can kind of seem like these 2 aspects of Taoism seem very, very different. The super philosophical, deep kind, and then the more practical, everyday religion. And today we're going to look at why Taoism is as is as broad and diverse of a tradition as it is, and how modern Taoism is in many ways a combination of several other traditions of Chinese religion that all came to be known as Taoism. So the word Tao, and you'll also see this word spelled with a T, Tao. So Tao or Tao, it's the same thing. This word Tao is a Chinese word, and it simply means path, means a way or a road. So Taoism is a tradition of taking a specific road, a specific path. And that refers both to kind of like a way of doing things, a way of proceeding through your life, and also we'll get more into this idea of qi, energy that makes up the universe, and learning to understand the way qi flows and the way qi works. And Taoism is very much a tradition of learning how to find your way, find your path through all these different energies and metaphysical, spiritual characteristics that make up the universe. That may seem confusing, but hopefully by the end of the lecture it won't be. So one important thing to remember about Taoism is that of all the religions we've looked at so far, and we've seen Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism now, Taoism is the least interested in this idea of good and evil. Taoists recognize there's good and evil in the world, and being a good person is important, but that's not what Taoism is about. Taoism, as I mentioned, is about qi. It's about understanding the way qi makes up the universe. Qi is energy, but it's not just energy. It has a sort of matter. It has a sort of physical characteristic. Everything that you see, everything physical, is made up of qi, of energy. And there are two essential kinds of qi. There's yin and there's yang, right? And you've seen the symbol many times before, the yin-yang. The 2 kinds of energy that make things up. And when Westerners see the symbol, they think black is bad and white is good. They think, like good and evil. But that's not what this is saying. It's saying that both are equally important. Yin and yang are are both parts of the universe, and they're equally important, and they need to be in balance with one another. And that idea of balance is very, very important, as we'll see. Okay, let's move on. So our goals for today, we're going to learn about Daoism in its three basic forms. We'll talk about the philosophy of Daoism, we'll talk about the alchemic and spiritual practices, and then we'll talk about popular religion. We're also going to talk about the principles of the Tao, Qi, cosmic balance, and inner alchemy. These four terms are going to be really important to this lecture. So hopefully by the end of the lecture, you will have some sense of what each of these mean. So this is a map of the River Valley civilizations. So we've had a chance to talk about the Indus Valley civilization from which Hinduism sprung. Over here we have the famous Euphrates, Tigris-Euphrates River, from which Mesopotamia and Babylonia sprung. It's where the birthplace of Judaism, of Christianity, of Islam. Over here we have the Nile, the famous Egyptian civilization. Today we're going to talk about this area here. This is where Chinese civilization sprang from the Yellow River and the Yangtze River here, right? And this is where Daoism comes as well. Just to give you kind of a sense of the ancient world, of what that looked like. These were the four great civilizations. This is a basic timeline as well. If you're not familiar with Chinese history, you're probably not. But you've probably heard a lot of the famous Chinese dynasties. There have been many Chinese dynasties, various kings and emperors who have ruled China. We're going to talk today about a little bit about early Chinese religion. And it's important to remember the early Chinese religion didn't have a name. They didn't call it Daoism. They didn't call it anything. Just like Hinduism wasn't called anything until people arrived and asked, the Indian people what their religion was called. The early Chinese religion and a lot of what we call Daoism now didn't have a name. And the name Daoism came about somewhere in the range of 600 to 300 BCE, right? Daoism was founded by this man Lao Tzu, and also called Lao Tzu. And the story of Lao Tzu was that he was a great philosopher, he was a great man, and he became very sick and tired of civilization and how corrupt and evil people were. And so he decided to travel into the west, to the mountains in the west. And we'll see this theme comes up a lot in Daoism. The mountains in the west of China were traditionally seen as this faraway magical land full of gods and immortals and dragons and things like that. And you hear stories of great people traveling into the mountains to find magical secrets and all sorts of different things. So the legend of Lao Tzu was that he became sick of civilization and he decided to leave. And when he got to the edge of China, he ran into a gatekeeper. There's a bridge that went over the mountains, or that went from one side of a canyon to another in the mountains. There's a gatekeeper there at the bridge, and he recognized Lao Tzu, and he begged him not to leave, and Lao Tzu said, "No, I'm going." And the gatekeeper, asked him, "Would you at least write down the things you have learned?" So Lao Tzu takes some parchment and a pen and ink, and he writes out the Tao Te Ching, which is the foundation of Daoism as we know it. It's this philosophical text. We saw a little bit of it in the first slide about the way the Tao works, about the way Qi works, about the balances within the universe, and how to live your life according to the principles of balance and Qi, which we'll see in a little bit. And that was the foundation. So initially, Daoism was something very different than what your average Chinese person was doing in terms of religion. Average Chinese person was praying to their ancestors, praying to gods, and Daoism was this very high-minded philosophical tradition. And they were separate. These two traditions were separate things for a long time. We'll talk about that. So Daoism became very popular amongst the elite, the emperor and the imperial family and the rich, educated people. Around the same time, Confucius, who we'll learn about in the next lecture, lived as well. He was also tired of the corruption that he was seeing around them. They both lived during the Zhou dynasty, which is famous in Chinese history for its warfare, for all of it's famous for China being divided at that time between various smaller kingdoms that were fighting with one another. So out of this time period, we have these two great masters who came up with these philosophies of trying to find balance and harmony in the world. It's really important to understanding the foundations of Chinese religion. Daoism had a resurgence probably about 100 years after Lao Tzu lived, in the form of one of his followers, someone who studied his writings, a man named Zhuangzi. And he expanded the Tao Te Ching. He didn't expand the Tao Te Ching itself. He expanded the tradition of the Tao Te Ching, expanded the texts, included stories about immortality, about people who used the principles of the Tao Te Ching and mastered all the elements of the universe and gained immortality. This is about the same time the idea of the heavenly masters, these great heavenly beings, becomes very popular. And this is also about the time when Buddhism starts to enter China. And at that time, again, Buddhism and Taoism didn't they didn't live together peacefully. Taoism and Buddhism were in competition with one another for a very long time. Okay, it wasn't until 748 CE that the canon, which was the canon of Taoism was set, so that at that time Taoist masters sat down and they decided which texts were legitimate and authentic, which ones weren't. They wrote them all down and they made sure that they had a good record of the texts. And then Taoism just very naturally, Taoism started to incorporate a lot of popular religion into it, and it's around that time that popular religion and Taoism came together and kind of became inseparable. And now these days, Taoism is both the high-minded philosophical part of Chinese religion and your average person's practices. Not much else happened in its history after that. Most of the religious development in China was happening with Buddhism after that. Buddhism was becoming quite widespread. Until recently, under the People's Republic of China, there are some Taoist sects that have experienced persecution, the Falun Gong, the Dafa, but Taoism is still very much alive and strong throughout Chinese culture, and we'll talk about that too. So it's just kind of a rough timeline of what happened with Taoism. Okay, so it's so hard to start with this. It's such a complicated story. So as I mentioned, original Chinese religious traditions didn't have a name; they were just religion. Taoist philosophy came out, and it came to influence this Taoism. The philosophies of Taoism came to influence all the rest of religion in China for the rest of its history. Even Buddhism, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, Chan Buddhism was a result of Buddhism meeting Taoism. Another important thing to know about Chinese religion is that it's more world-affirming than later Buddhist traditions or Hinduism or a lot of other religions we're going to look at. What does that mean? It's world-affirming. Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism all had this idea that this world is samsara. Remember, this world is just illusion, and our goal is to break out of this illusion, to break out of the cycle of reincarnation, and get out of this world. And part of doing that is being unattached to the world and being uninterested in, kind of the trappings of this world in terms of greed and sensual pleasures and all those kinds of things. Chinese religion in general doesn't downplay this world. For Daoism, we live in this world, and this world is real. This world is very much real. And traditionally, before Buddhism entered China, there was not a belief in reincarnation. This was your only life. So Daoism and traditional Chinese religion was more interested in helping people attain a good life here in this world, right? So you go to the temple to pray for good grades. You go to the temple to pray for a better job so that you can have more money, so you can buy a bigger house for your family and take care of your family. There's not this idea that this world is completely corrupt and we need to break out of it. Now, there is a strong belief within Chinese religion that this world can be corrupt, but from the Chinese point of view, it depends upon human beings to create a just and orderly society. In order to purge it of corruption. We can purge the world of corruption if we are virtuous. And that's what Confucius was saying, and we'll learn about that in the next lesson. But Daoism, again, is not interested in good and evil. It's not interested in punishing people for the sins that they do. It's interested in helping people live in harmony with nature, with the gods, and with heaven. And helping people achieve a better life. Yes. Daoism was also very spiritual. Daoism definitely, or Chinese religion, definitely follows that the world is full of spirits, all kinds of spirits. Gods and demons, ghosts of all kinds, immortals, right? Great Taoist sages who were able to master all of the secrets of the universe, the Tao, Qi, different kind of magical properties, and make themselves live forever. Dragons are spirits within the Chinese tradition. And actually, we usually think of dragons as being evil, but in Eastern Asia, dragons were generally considered very good. Dragons were always very wise, very powerful spirits. Oftentimes, the spirits associated with mountains, rivers, and other, large natural things were dragon spirits. So they weren't necessarily bad. And all sorts of different kinds of spirits in nature as well. So part of traditional Chinese religion was learning how to please the good spirits and avoid the bad spirits. Part of a very important part of ancient Chinese religion, even up until today, is ancestor veneration. This is not, people call it ancestor worship, but the Chinese don't worship their ancestors, they venerate them. What's the difference? Veneration means respect, right? So you respect and take care of your ancestors, just like you would venerate your parents, or you'd venerate, a teacher or one of your elders. It's not worship, it's veneration. So we'll see a couple of pictures today of altars that Chinese people have at home. A lot of times they have home altars. They have pictures of ancestors, and a lot of times, or they'll at least have the names of ancestors written out. Rich families might have an entire book with as many ancestor names as they have in record. Or and a lot of families, not all families, but a lot of families have this idea of the founding ancestor. There's one ancestor who is held in higher regard than all the other ancestors, maybe because he was very important, or he was very successful, and on a daily basis, the ancestors will be given some small offerings. Another thing Chinese religion does, it includes a number of rites to ward off demons and ghosts. There are a number of ways that Chinese people will keep their homes and their businesses safe from those sorts of things. And divination plays a very important part as well. It's believed that divination, meaning fortune telling, there are a number of ways of telling fortunes in Chinese religion. So this is a very important part of the way Chinese people see the world. It's full of spirit. Traditionally, this stuff, I think, these things I've mentioned up here are all very much true even today in China. This down here, the mandate of heaven, is an older idea. It was an idea circulated or believed in during the time of the emperors. There's this idea that emperors and kings had the mandate of heaven, which means they had the approval of heaven to be the ruler of their people. And emperors and kings in China were not just rulers, but they were also priests. They were the highest priest of their people. And a lot of what the emperors did was, not a lot, but in addition to all like the political stuff, emperors were expected to perform a number of special rites and rituals and ceremonies to keep their kingdom in good standing with heaven. Heaven was called Tian. For a time in its history, China didn't really have an idea of one singular god, but a number of gods. And during that time, the emperor had to stay in good standing with Tian, with heaven as a whole, with heaven as a realm as a whole. Later on, Chinese religion developed this idea of Shangdi, which is the emperor of heaven, who's like the most powerful of all the gods. And then it became this mandate of heaven became a relationship between the emperor, the Chinese emperor on earth, and Shangdi in heaven, and making sure there was good relations there. Good relations are very important in Chinese culture and religion and in everyday life too. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I just have so much to cover. I just want to make sure I'm getting everything. Okay. So cosmic balance. This idea is very important, so pay attention to this. This idea that the cosmos is a manifestation of an impersonal spiritual substance. That's a very interesting way of putting it. What's the best way I've ever seen Qi explained? It's a spirit, it's spiritual, but it's also a substance, it's stuff. But it's not a person, it's not a god, it's just the stuff that the universe is made of. It's both spiritual and it's real as well. It has two aspects, the yin and the yang. Yin is dark, it's receptive, it's traditionally female. Yang is bright, assertive, and traditionally male. All things are made up of yin and yang, and you want to have a right balance of those two things. In general, you want there to always to be a balance in the cosmos, in the entire universe. And important part of Daoism is recognizing that individually, personally, you have these two substances as well, and you need to have a personal balance. And that can mean eating a good diet and taking care of your body. It can mean acting a certain way in your business or in your other relations. There are a lot of different ways that this yin-yang balance plays out in individual people's lives, and we'll see different ways that that happens. But that's the very basis of Daoism, right? It has to be a balance in nature. And Dao, the path, is the way of working your way through. In a sense, sometimes I call it going with the flow. Daoism means you're going with the flow of Qi, and you're not trying to swim against it. You never want to swim upstream, right? You never want to swim sideways or try to attempt to go through the rapids if you're not a strong swimmer. You need to recognize the way with the way Qi is flowing, the way it moves, the way it influences your life, and work with it. You want to work with it. We'll talk more about that. So the book defines Daoism, or Dao, the way, the path. It's the creative rhythm of the universe. That makes more sense, maybe. Both Daoism and Confucianism seek to harmonize with the cosmos, to steer a coherent course. Again, that metaphor of a stream, right? You want to steer a course through the stream, a good, safe course. In the West, we have this idea that we can kind of almost fight the universe. If you have enough power within you, you can move mountains, you can change things. But in Daoism, it's this idea that you can't. The universe is really big and we're very small. So you can't move things. You can't move mountains. You can't change things. You can't change the direction that the stream flows. What you can do is be observant and be patient and learn the way these things work. I was talking to a student the other day. He said, what if you don't know about the Tao? It's not fair. He said that some people might not understand what the Tao is and or what the way to go is. And I said, well, think of it this way. If you encountered a barking dog, like an angry barking dog, I said, what would you do? He said, well, I guess I'd step away from it. And I'm like, well, then you understand the Tao, right? You recognize that animal is angry. You understand the way he's moving and what he's likely to do, and you're reacting to it accordingly. That's what the Tao is in a very simple way. It's recognizing the way the world is working, and acting accordingly. Yes, and as I mentioned before, balance. This idea of balance is really important, and it plays out in nature, it plays out between gods and people, it plays out between energy and matter, a number of different ways that we'll see. This is a quote from a philosopher named Philip Novak, who's one of my favorite modern philosophers. He has a beautiful way of explaining Daoism. He says, the Chinese mind has long beheld the universe as a living process governed by the interplay of opposites, the yin and the yang. We live, China testifies, amid a dynamic dance of complementary forces, yin and yang, manifest in the mysterious cooperation of light and dark, heat and cold, male and female, willfulness and receptivity, life's countless contrary pairs. Right? So for the Chinese, the world is made up of all of these dualisms that live in harmony with one another. I love the words that Novak pulls out. It's an interplay. It's a dance of complementary forces. It's cooperation between the two forces. It's not a fight. Don't think of this as a struggle. It should not be a struggle. Everything about Daoism suggests that it should be simple. It should be easy. It should just be nice. This is a model here that I pulled off the internet, and I think it does a good job of explaining how this idea of yin and yang becomes very complicated, becomes very complex in Daoism. This is a model of that's based on the I Ching. And you'll notice that in the middle we have the yin-yang, and then here we have all of these sets of lines. And here you can see, every time you see a dotted line, it represents the yin. Every time you see a straight line, it represents the yang. There's a fortune telling thing that the Chinese use called the I Ching, and it uses a similar set of lines, except instead of 3 lines, there's actually 6 lines. And instead of, what do we have here? Instead of 8 possible combinations of yin and yang, in the real I Ching there's actually 64 combinations, because there's 6 lines, and each line and each square within the I Ching has a different combination of yin and yang lines. So what does this mean? Well, it's something I've looked at before, and I don't completely understand it, but I know that each level of lines has a different meaning about the universe. Like the top represents like heaven, and the bottom represents like earth, and then there are middle lines that represent other things. And so these would represent all the different ways that yin and yang will can be present in your environment, and the different ways that they mix together, and the different combinations or the results of the combinations that they make. Does that make sense? Right, so think of it like a recipe, right? If you have more yin and a little bit of yang, what will it make? If you have lots of yin and just a little bit of yang, or if it's mixed, if you start with a lot of yin, a little yang in, put a little more yang in, a little bit of yin in, like what will it make up, right? Think of it like a recipe. And So the Taoist masters have these ideas of the different ways that yin and yang can mix together, the different recipes, in a sense. I use the metaphor of recipes. That doesn't mean that Taoist masters can literally manipulate yin and yang and take yin and take yang. No, it doesn't work like that. It's just about trying to recognize the way they naturally flow together, right, in different ways. And they have all these different ways of trying to express what the results are, right? Having all yang and no yin energy whatsoever is associated with the sky, which is kind of which is where heaven is. It's where the gods live. It's associated with being like a father, being an authority figure. It's associated with north. Each of these balances of yin and yang can be reflected in matter, in personal relationships, in the directions of the world, in mountains and rivers and lakes. Each combination is reflected throughout the world, is the point, right? You want to understand what makes up the world. You need to understand these different combinations, these different interplays of yin and yang energy. And later on, we'll look at Feng Shui, and we'll look at how this idea here of the I Ching came to create Feng Shui, which is a very interesting phenomenon. Yes. Okay. So we'll start with the philosophical side of Daoism. Daoism really, as we've already talked, it's kind of this umbrella term that combines beliefs and practices, but there's also this very literati tradition, this philosopher's tradition. I love this man down here. He's very much an ancient Chinese philosopher. He's sitting on the mountaintop. He's studying the wind. He's studying the way the wind moves, trying to understand Qi by looking at the way the wind moves, right? There's this philosophical tradition that underlies all of it. And it even, at one point, tried to really distance itself from popular religion. For a long time, Daoists thought of themselves as better than your average Chinese person who was doing, who was practicing fortune telling, who was praying to the gods, and so on and so forth. Right? This was a tradition of the intelligent, of people who can understand the universe in ways that your average person couldn't. And these days, it can more involve Taoist practices, Confucian virtues, and Buddhist-style rituals. But that came much later. At first, it was just a literati tradition. Two major texts of the philosophical tradition were the Tao Te Ching, which means the classic of the way and its power. It's written by Lao Tzu. The basis of the Tao Te Ching is that anyone can live happily by harmonizing themselves with the universe, trying to be receptive to beauty in nature, right? So this idea here of sitting on the mountaintop and studying the way nature works, it's how you understand the Tao better. It's all around us. If we just can learn from nature and learn from the gods how to work it, and being silent. Meditation was an important part of Daoism. Zhuangzi, who was a follower of Lao Tzu, believed that the best approach to life was detachment, right? And so this is when where you see Chinese religion and Hindu-based religions, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, being kind of similar but also kind of different. When Zhuangzi talked about detachment, he wasn't talking about necessarily spiritually detaching yourself so that you can rid yourself of karma. Zhuangzi meant that living in the city was that the city was not a good place for the Tao, right? There were too many people, and everyone has a will, and it's Qi does not move well through cities in the Chinese way of thinking, because there are people who are trying to fight against the current all the time and make for themselves, and who aren't who aren't trying to live in harmony with the way things are supposed to be. So for a lot of the Taoist masters, it was about getting away from people and studying nature. Daoism also has this interesting paradox called wu wei, which means actionless action. Actionless action means that you act in such a way as to not try to interfere with what's going on around you. You act in such a way as to not make waves, simply put. You're trying to move through the water without making waves. And the Taoists called this actionless action. Now, later on, Buddhism encountered this idea of wu wei, and this is where Chan Buddhism came from. But really, the Buddhist idea of not acting, the Buddhist idea of being detached to the world, is based in this idea that the world is an illusion anyway, right? You don't want to be too much a part of the world because the world is illusion, and it doesn't matter, it's not real. Taoists don't think that it's not real, it's very much real, and that's why we shouldn't mess with it, right? We shouldn't try to change the natural order of things. Rather, you want to act in such a way as you let the natural order be. And you don't make waves, bottom line. So again, we can see this idea of cosmic balance coming out again, right? The cosmos is in balance, and we don't want to upset that. So from the philosophy of Taoism, we get these elite Taoist teachings, is the way the book puts it. And the basis of these elite teachings is inner alchemy. From Taoism, we get all these practices, this way of life for the very educated, the very intelligent, for philosophers to try and cultivate themselves, try to gain wisdom and knowledge, to extend their lives, and maybe even gain immortality. Some people have compared inner alchemy to like magic, and I would say that we only call magic isn't the best term for it. Magic is a term we use for religions that we don't understand. There's a religious practice that seems strange to you or that you don't understand. We'll say, oh, it's magic. We kind of brush aside it's magic. For the Taoists, this is spirituality. This is religion. It's learning how to not manipulate, but to maximize your own spiritual potentials in order to become a higher being. So this word alchemy, I don't know if you've ever heard the word alchemy before, but it's a combination of chemistry and magical principles, right? Magic potions is alchemy, right? Potions sounds like chemistry. You're putting different chemicals together and trying to make something. But alchemy is also magic. It's interested in altering or refining something's basic nature. So, for example, in the medieval times in Europe, there were alchemists who believed that it was possible to take lead and turn it into gold using alchemy. It's a combination of chemistry and magic. Magic potions is a perfect example of what alchemy is. We call magic potions is kind of the derogatory name for it. In religion, they're called elixirs. Right, an elixir is some sort of magic. Is some sort of supernatural concoction that has special supernatural effects. For example, like an elixir of life, or the fountain of youth that gives anyone who drinks from it immortality, that sort of thing. So from this idea, you can kind of see how in Taoism there's this idea that you can understand the way the universe works. You can learn to go with the flow of things. So you can kind of see how they're developed this further idea that if you do learn how to follow the Tao and harmonize yourself with the universe, there will be some sort of positive repercussions for you, right? And the Taoist masters believe the reward for learning how to put yourself in harmony with the universe, put yourself in balance with the cosmos, was self-cultivation, which means intelligence and wisdom, a longer life, or immortality. There's a question as to whether or not medieval Chinese people believed in that Taoism would get them like literal immortality, like you're actually going to go to the mountains in the West and live forever with the gods and other supernatural people, or if this referred to some sort of spiritual immortality, like maybe like a better afterlife. We're not really sure, but that was always the desire of Taoist sages, to move into the mountains, to study the Tao, to learn all these alchemy forms, learn how to make elixirs, and eventually find immortality. From this tradition, we get a very famous story in China of a goddess called Queen Mother of the West. Right, the Western Mountains is where she lived, and she guards the elixir of life. It's her job, and so there are many stories within Taoism of great Taoist sages who go off looking for her, and sometimes they find her, sometimes they don't. Oftentimes, they're never seen again. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding her, but she's a very popular figure in Taoism, and in Chinese mythology. You see the Queen Mother of the West a lot. She's a very famous goddess. Another part, in addition to alchemy, another part of this elite Taoism is using the various energies available and learning to manipulate those. So there are three treasures within Taoism. It's not just qi, which is present everywhere. There's also jing and shen. Jing is like your personal generative force, is what the book calls it. It has to do with your health. It has to do with the energy that keeps your body going. That's very related to your health and your the physical energy that you have every day. And then there's also Shen, which means spirit, right? So what the Taoist masters were doing is they were trying to create these special elixirs, and they were also trying to learn to manipulate the energies, the three energies within themselves, not the energies around them, because that's against Taoism. You don't manipulate the energies around you. You don't try to change that. You can work with the energy that's inside of you. And a lot of Taoist physical practices, like we'll look at pictures of Tai Chi, and some other things are based on this idea of trying to get all the energies in your body balanced and flowing properly. Balanced and flowing properly. Everything has to move the way it's supposed to. The three of them move, think of them like a circulation system, like your blood flows through your veins, so your qi and your jing flow through your body. And if there's a blockage, if there's an energy blockage somewhere in your body, it can cause problems for your mind, for your mood, it can cause problems for your health. So you have to keep those things in balance. And all of these practices, these practices and teachings were not commonly taught. These were like secret practices that were taught from a teacher to a student, right? If you think of Kung Fu, the TV series Kung Fu, right? You have a master and you have a student, and the master is teaching the student all the secrets that he knows. It's kind of that tradition, that story tradition in China. These secret teachings that are taught from a teacher to a good student. So that is the second kind of form of Taoism we see. We see the philosophy. We see a very interesting and unusual religious practice coming out of the philosophy. And then the third thing that that's added to Taoism is popular religion. So for a long time, Taoists considered themselves better than your average Chinese person. For many centuries, Taoism was something that the rich and the educated did, and the other forms of religion were something that poor, illiterate peasants did. But eventually, as time went on, Taoism became increasingly well respected by rich and poor people alike. And there came to be over time, there are various Taoist sages and specialists who began to take charge of kind of popular religious tasks like divination, faith healing, the use of talismans, which are items with spirit, like pendants and other things you carry with you that keep you safe, like a rabbit's foot, for example. Is a talisman. It keeps you safe, or other sorts of talismans that might keep you in good health or protect you from evil spirits. All these kinds of things that your average Chinese person practiced in Chinese religion. Slowly the Taoist sages started taking these things over and started practicing them and performing them for people, both rich and poor. And over time, Taoist temples gained, a number of what we call average people, peasants and whatnot, who came to burn incense and make offerings to the gods and the immortals within the Taoist stories. Because for Chinese people, it's not as though in Chinese religion you can only pray to a certain set of gods. You can pray to any gods. You can pray to any spirits that you want to. Anyone who will help you, anyone who's on the other side, who's in the unseen, who can help you, is someone that you can pray to. So over time, like these Taoist gods became popular amongst Chinese people, and people began going to the Taoist gods, offering, good deeds, offerings, food, money in exchange for blessings, the way they would with the other gods. Taoist masters took over Feng Shui, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Feng Shui was a shamanistic folk tradition. It was very much a folk tradition, and Taoism took it over and kind of expanded it further. There are a couple gods, the kitchen god and Matsu, the consort of heaven, who's a goddess. These two were popular Chinese gods. They were not Taoist gods. And eventually they got taken into Taoism and they became Taoist gods. And their stories changed and expanded to include a lot of Taoist principles. So Matsu, who's often called the grandma of worshippers, she's like this kindly goddess who is very merciful and will help you. She made her way into the Taoist pantheon of gods and became known not just as the grandma worshippers, but the consort of heaven, the wife of heaven. She gained this Taoist title. So it's very interesting how Taoism started to take on certain popular Chinese religious aspects, and popular Chinese religion started to take on Taoist aspects, and eventually the two just came together and two became intertwined. So today, it's all kind of the same thing. After all of that, breaking down Taoism into these three sections, the point of all that is that those are the three parts that make up Chinese religion today. In addition to Confucianism and Buddhism, which we'll talk about later. But in terms of Taoism, it all came together in the end. And part of that had to do with the influx of Buddhism, which was a foreign religion, and caused Taoism and popular Chinese religion to kind of come together to kind of protect themselves against foreign influence. There's kind of a sense of, I'm Chinese, I'm a Chinese tradition, you're a Chinese tradition. We need to stick together and we need to identify as Chinese and not foreign, which was Buddhism. In any event, we see aspects of all these things in Chinese religion today. So let's look at a couple, some common ways of practicing Chinese religion today. So this is ancestor veneration. In this corner here, you see an altar. You see the entire family has gathered around this home altar. There are usually pictures. I don't see any pictures here of ancestors, but oftentimes there will be. There are all these offerings that they're giving. They're burning incense. Most religions use incense in one way or another. In Chinese religion, there's this idea that the smoke of the incense, as it rises, will bring your prayers up. As I mentioned, balance in relationships is very important. In the Chinese belief that in an afterlife, but it is not like a heaven and hell type situation. you die and you go into the afterlife, and then you need your descendants, the people, your children, and so on and so forth, to send you offerings to take care of you. So just like your parents take care of you when they die, you take care of them by sending them offerings and presents of all kinds. Here you can see this bucket here is full of this paper. This is called paper money. It's fake money. It's being offered to this family's ancestors, so as a present to them. Here you see not just a family, but businesses do this as well. This is a picture of Taiwan, I'm almost positive. Here's a business front, and either the business is just opening now, or it's a special temple day, or maybe the business is having trouble and needs help. So the owners have put out all of these offerings in front of the business to the business owner's ancestors. They're burning a lot of paper money. You can see how much paper money they're burning. So again, Chinese religion is not looking for salvation, or it's not looking to break out of this world. It's looking for safety and prosperity in this life, like helping your business or taking care of your family. You notice this here? I think that's a cross. That looks right there. Looks like a cross. It's possible that this family has put a Christian cross on their altar. For Asian people, we've seen this time again, and especially when we look at Far East Asia. There's not this idea that you have to choose one religion and that is your religion and you identify as that religion, that's all you can do. No, religion is religion. There are lots of traditions, there are lots of different gods that people pray to, and you kind of choose the ones that you want. And you don't identify yourself by your religion. You identify yourself through your family and through your family's traditions. I know some students think that because Asian religions oftentimes have this choice, like you can choose which gods you want to focus on, that means there's a lot of freedom of personal choice in Asia, and there isn't. There is not. I don't ever want to give you that impression. In fact, in Asia, there's a great emphasis on conformity. You conform to the rules and the values that your family gives you, right, that your society gives you. But those rules and values that you conform to, they don't come from religion. In the West, the rules and values that we conform to come from churches and things like that. In the East, it comes from family. And this is one way. You have to take care of your family, so your family will take care of you. Divination is another important part of Chinese religion. There are a lot of different forms of divination, fortune telling in China, Taiwan, Singapore, etc. There's palm reading. You can see there's a master here reading palms. This is part of the I Ching. I've actually done this before. You go to a Taoist temple, and there's this large canister and has all these sticks inside. And you put the cap on. The cap is on, and I don't know if you can tell here. There's some writings, but there's also an opening. That's a hole right there. And each of these sticks is small enough to fit through that hole. So what you do is you take this can with all the sticks inside, and you put the lid on it, and you shake it, and you think of your question that you need answered, and then you kind of do this with it, and what you're doing is you're forcing one of these sticks out of the hole, right there, and it has a number on it, and it has some Chinese writing on it. And you take the number and you take the writing to the fortune teller at the temple, and you pay the fortune teller, and they will explain to you what the answer means. This is another fortune telling way. This is a really ancient one. All you do is you take these pieces of wood and you drop them. You think of your question and you drop them. And again, you need a professional fortune teller to help read the way they fall. They can read the way based upon the way the colors and if they fall like this on their backs or if they fall flat, and how they're facing each other. The answer to your question lies there. So, and it's believed that these answers are not coming from the chi, they're coming from the gods. The gods of that temple are answering your questions. So you have to give an offering to the temple as well on behalf of the gods. Or for the gods. in order to get your answer. So that's another interesting part of Chinese religion. And of course, there's worship. Chinese temples are so beautiful. You can see how ornate they are. They're covered with images of different spirits, dragons, gods, all sorts of different things. Lots of bright colors. People come in. You can come into the temple at any time that it's open, and give a small donation, or maybe bring some food, and then you burn incense. And incense, again, helps bring your prayers up to heaven. Temple days, there's certain holidays when the temples will be very crowded. Days before, like exams, they'll be crowded with students. And so it's something that you do whenever you want to, really. This is the inside of a temple. You can see these two women here are praying to the images of the various gods who are back here. And all this food has been put out, and all this fresh fruit has been put out as offerings, and cups of tea and things like that, as offerings to the gods. And I believe, I'm not positive on this, but I believe that the Chinese treat these images similar to the way Hindus treat their images, that they are technically just statues, but that by treating them with respect and putting them within the temples, and by the priests performing certain rites, they draw the essence, or they draw a little bit of the spirit of the gods down into the images for people to connect to. We talked about Matsu before. She's a very popular goddess. I want to show you a couple of her temples. This one's in Taiwan. I've actually been to that one, so I pulled that one out. But she has one major festival during the year. You can see everyone is here for that festival. See how crowded it is? One festival during the year, they pull her statue out of the temple and they parade it around the town. And everyone tries to touch the statue, because if you touch the statue, you get blessings. Women will, especially women who are having trouble conceiving children, will be blessed with a son. Or if you're having any sort of troubles, with your business or whatever, she will help you overcome the obstacles in your life. And this is her temple, just kind of on an average sort of day. This one is I can't remember the name of this temple, but you can see it's beautiful, it's ornate. It's a popular tourist destination for foreigners and for Chinese people alike. And how should I put this? It's interesting to note that, like, for Chinese people, it's an act of devotion, but it's also a tradition that you do. I don't know that people get really zealous about Daoism. I don't know that people get really excited or get very pumped up about Daoism. It's not as emotional as we think of religion in the West. We think of loving you in the West. We think of religion as loving God and having emotional experiences about all these kinds of things, identifying as a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. And Daoism, though, this is just something that you do. It's just something that you do, but it's still important to them. It's still very important. It's just not as emotional. Feng Shui is another interesting way, interesting part of Daoism. So originally, Feng Shui was just this idea of this old shamanistic folk tradition of trying to keep ghosts and evil spirits out of your home. And then Daoism got a hold of it, and it added the principles of qi and Dao to it, and it became much more complicated. So the idea of Feng Shui is that all these different forms of qi, all these different combinations of qi, move in different ways, and they have different effects on your life. So if they move in different ways, they have different effects on your life, then it makes sense to organize your home, or organize your business, or organize your physical space in such a way as to let qi move more smoothly, and so that you have more success in your life. Now this is something I found on the internet. This is a chart of how to organize your office space, whether it just be like a cubicle or a larger office full of cubicles and offices. How to organize it in such a way as to be more successful. And you can see that it's all the space is diagrammed based on this idea here, this model of the way qi moves in north, south, east, west, and the different effects each of these combinations have. So, if your entrance is here, if you can see this, then your water, you want your water element. Water is here. It's kan. It's east. Because a lot of times you want to have an eastern gate. It's good to have an entrance in the east. You want to have your water element is going to be strongest here, and water is associated with communication. So this is where you put your reception area. This is where you meet people. This is where you're gonna, put your mission statement. Now, on the other side of things, in the west, if this is east and this is west, this is where the fire element is going to flow most smoothly. And fire is associated with your reputation, with charisma, with the way you impact other people. So this is so the west is where you want to put your public relations and other kind of reputation building parts of your business there. Now, north is sky. So if this is east, west, this would be north, right? And it's associated with the metal element. Marketing, creative production, project completion. This is where creativity takes place, and so on and so forth. Prosperity happens over here, so this is where you're going to put happens in, what is that? That's southwest. So southwest, this is where prosperity comes from. So this is where you put your finances and accounting, and so on and so forth. So there are these different ways to keep your home or your office balanced, and they use similar sorts of things at home too. Except at home there are additional rules like you should never have a mirror facing a window because it will reflect your good fortune and send it right back out again. There are different ways of organizing your space so that you don't allow ghosts or evil spirits in, all sorts of different things. So you can see part of it is based in that old folk tradition of trying to keep evil spirits out, and part of it is based in this more modern, this more complex idea of Tao, of the way Tao works and affects your life, and trying to maximize that. Again, you're not trying to change the flow of Tao. You're not trying to change the flow of Qi. Quite the contrary, you're trying to work with it and make it work for you. So it's a very interesting tradition within Chinese religion. So Daoism today, it continues in three major forms: organized religious institutions in the forms of temples and monasteries. There's several societies for self-cultivation, which are basically groups that are interested in things like Tai Chi and other sorts of energy practices. Qigong is similar to Tai Chi in some ways. The Falun Gong, these are groups that are interested in learning how to work with your different energies. They're practitioners of spiritual development, health, and longevity, including acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine, Tai Chi. It should be noted that the Chinese medicine, it is not based in religion or magic. Even though it comes from Daoism, it's not religious, it's not magical, it's not alchemy, it's herbal medicine. But Chinese religion or Chinese medicine was developed from this idea within Daoism that we can look to nature for materials, for herbs that will improve our health and make us live longer. So herbal medicine in China is based in Daoism, but nowadays it's very scientific, right? You have to go to medical school to become a Chinese doctor. You can see this man is measuring out these different Chinese herbs very carefully. Acupuncture was once believed that putting these needles in your body was going to alter the flow of your energy, of your qi and your jing. And so like putting a boulder in a stream, it would make the water flow around it or flow in different ways. So that was the idea of acupuncture. Modern scientists have found that it works. Acupuncture does work to decrease pain, but only because the Chinese masters actually, they weren't finding energy points, they were finding nerve endings. So that's what acupuncture is. It hits certain nerve endings that cause, and it causes your body to relax. It releases pain, it releases swelling if you have injuries. But it was based on this idea that what they were really hitting was energy points in your body. There's still revelation and prophecy within certain parts of Daoism. There's a group called the Golden. There's a goddess called the Golden Mother of the Celestial Pool, and she still sends revelations, and she still sends inspirations and divination down to various Buddhist and Taoist traditions. So that's still active. And I love this quote from the book. It says, "Tao is so ingrained in Chinese understanding that it is a basic concept that cannot be defined, like goodness. Try to define goodness. Or Dharma in Hinduism, right? Do you remember we first studied Dharma? It's like, what is Dharma? It's everything. What is the Tao? It's the way things are. Simply put, for the Chinese, Tao is the way things are. It's very interesting that it's so difficult to define because it's such an important part of the way the Chinese view the universe. So we'll end with just a few modern Taoist sects that still practice in China and Taiwan today. The Celestial Masters are very popular. They practice healings by faith. They organize. They have an organized pantheon, a set of gods that they worship and work with. So priesthood, who are actually able to control those gods, or are able to work with them and get them to bless their followers. There's highest purity Taoism, which is more of a philosophical sect. It's a group of celibate monks who live in the mountain, and they seek a very pure and simple life. Again, studying the Tao the old-fashioned way by being out in nature and watching the way nature works. Then the numinous treasure, which is more of a combination of Buddhism and Taoism, and participates in a number of charities. And another popular Taoist group is the Complete Perfection, and they have a famous monastery in Beijing called the White Cloud Monastery. And they call it Complete Perfection because they combine Taoism with Buddhism with Confucianism, the three teachings of China, right? So they combine this inner alchemy with meditation from Buddhism and Confucian ideas of social morality, of being a good person in that way. And so it's really, so for them, it's a perfect sect. It's a perfect school of thought.